just clear whoever it is through. I think the prospect that you're going to have a counterintelligence investigation problem for 2 of your 3 national security advisors, while the Flynn one is still resonating. I mean, Flynn is still awaiting sentencing. I think the John Bolton situation is a real question. We'll see.
And there's always the possibility of a pardon discussion in the White House for Donald Trump's first national security advisor. And would the current national security advisor be part of that discussion?
Yeah.
The things to imagine.
Yeah, and who clears the security clearance? And yeah.
All of that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Well, in the mini-series about Robert Mueller's investigation, there are going to be a lot of dramatic scenes in airports and a lot of different airports. It seems that Robert Mueller's FBI agents are doing a lot of their work in American airports. They first secretly arrested George Papadopoulos when he got off a plane at Washington Dulles Airport in July. And tonight, the New York Times is reporting that in February, federal agents stopped Joel Zamel, an Australian entrepreneur, at National Airport in Washington and briefly seized his electronic devices. The Times is also reporting tonight, about 4 weeks ago, FBI agents working with Mr. Mueller's team stopped a Russian oligarch at a New York area airport, questioned him about his dealings with Mr. Trump, and seized his electronics, according to a person familiar with the matter. And Ted Malloch, a Trump campaign advisor, was stopped at Logan Airport in Boston, when he returned from an international trip. FBI agents reportedly took his cell phone and questioned him about Roger Stone and WikiLeaks. And George Nader became a cooperating witness after he was stopped at Dulles Airport in January. George Nader is emerging as a more and more complex figure in the investigation, with connections stretching from the United Arab Emirates to Russia. The New York Times has new reporting on the extent of George Nader's connections with Russia. Nader is a Lebanese-American businessman who used his Russian connections to set up what has now become, to close followers of this drama, the famous meeting in the Seychelles between Trump transition advisor Erik Prince and the manager of a state-run Russian investment fund. People familiar with the meeting have now told the New York Times that its purpose was, quote, in part to explore the possibility of a back channel for discussions between the Trump administration and the Kremlin. According to the Times, Mueller's investigators have been pressing, quote, for details about a meeting Mr. Nader attended in New York in early 2017 with Jared Kushner and Steve Bannon at the office of the hedge fund manager Richard Gerson, a friend of Mr. Kushner's. At the time of that meeting, Kushner and Bannon were White House advisors to the president. One focus of the investigation is whether any Russians illegally funneled cash donations into the Trump presidential campaign and inauguration. And there are new developments surrounding Roger Stone's contact with WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. The Wall Street Journal reported that in an email dated August 4th, 2016, Mr. Stone wrote, "I dined with Julian Assange last night," according to a copy of the message reviewed by the Wall Street Journal. On the same day that Roger Stone sent that email, August 4th, 2016, he appeared on the right-wing conspiracy theory show InfoWars, saying that Julian Assange has proof of scandals at the Clinton Foundation.
Let's remember that their defense in all of the Clinton Foundation scandals has been, not we didn't do it, has been you have no proof. Yes, but you have no proof. Well, I think Julian Assange has that proof, and I think he's going to furnish it to the American people.
In that same appearance, Roger Stone said that he spoke to Donald Trump the day before, which was exactly the same day he says he dined with Julian Assange. Joining us now, Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell from California. He's a member of the House Intelligence Committee. Also with us, Parva McQuaid, a former federal prosecutor and professor of law at the University of Michigan. She's an NBC News and MSNBC legal contributor. And Matt Miller, former spokesman for Attorney General Eric Holder and an MSNBC contributor. And Congressman Swalwell, I want to begin with what we were just learning about Roger Stone. He writes an email saying that he dined with Julian Assange. The next day, he goes on a show and talks about the day after he says he dined with Julian Assange, he goes on a show, talks about what he expects Julian Assange is going to reveal, something about the Clinton Foundation and scandals. What do you make of where Roger Stone is now fitting into this story?
Good evening, Lawrence. certainly appears that every tree that you shake in the Trump forest, a Russian falls out of it. And we learn more and more today about that. I'm first believe that Roger Stone did have foreknowledge about what the Russians were going to do. He was in communications with Guccifer 2.0, a Russian cutout that was used to disseminate Hillary Clinton's emails, and he was very close to Donald Trump. So what I hope Bob Mueller's team gets to the bottom of, which is something that the House Intelligence Committee was not, because the Republicans who impeded us, was to find out what knowledge Donald Trump had about what Roger Stone knew. Because if Donald Trump had knowledge that Roger Stone was aware of what the Russians were doing or what Julian Assange was doing, then that changes everything. And that would explain a lot about some of the cryptic messaging that Donald Trump was putting out, that there would be information about Hillary Clinton that would be forthcoming, or continuing to invite the Russians to hack Hillary's deleted emails. And so I'm encouraged that Bob Mueller's team is moving as fast as they are and as doggedly as they are, and hopefully Roger Stone sits in their witness chair very soon.
And Congressman Adam Schiff, who's the top Democrat on your committee, said about these about the Roger Stone email. He said that it makes it very clear that the Republicans ended the probe, your investigation, too early because Stone never gave that email to the committee. Was Stone subpoenaed for that email or for any documents?
Again, this is the problem with our investigation, was Stone, like many others, was not required to turn over all of the documents that he possessed, all of the communications that he had, his travel records, his bank records. We ran a take them at their word investigation. These individuals, as you see, are not worthy of being taken at their word. You have to subpoena them, like they did with, like the FBI did with Papadopoulos and George Nader. You have to confront them with outside evidence, and hopefully you can get them to give you some measure of the truth. And so, you know, if investigations are not complete by the time that hopefully we win the House, we may be in a position where we have to do this investigation all over again, so the American people know who should be held to account.
And Barbara McQuade, Roger Stone has already offered his defense about that email, saying he dined with Julian Assange. His defense is that it was a joke. How does that joke play?
Yeah, if it's a joke, it's not particularly funny, although it seems unlikely that he actually had dinner with Julian Assange in light of the logistics of Julian Assange being in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. But nonetheless, it does seem to suggest that he had contact with Julian Assange. They don't have to meet face-to-face to have contact. They can certainly speak by telephone, by some other communications device, by text, by direct message, or other means. And so I don't know that it was literally true, but it seems quite coincidental that he has this information, he's publishing this information, and to not have spoken to Julian Assange. So I'm sure Robert Mueller is trying to get to the bottom of that, of what kind of coordination there was between Roger Stone and WikiLeaks, and as the congressman said, with President Trump himself.
Matt Miller, it turns out the TSA, they're not the only agents at the airports these days. The airports in the Northeast, anyway, from Boston to Washington, are crawling with FBI agents when Russian oligarchs are getting off the planes, or anyone else who Robert Mueller's interested in.
Yeah, it's an extremely aggressive set of steps by the special prosecutor. And one of the things I think a lot of people don't realize, it is a great place for him and his agents to approach these witnesses, because when you come through customs, when you come through immigration, FBI agents don't need a search warrant to seize your phone, to seize your computer, and get access to them. It's a great, and if you want to ask witnesses questions, they're of course there without their attorney. No one is obligated to ask questions, but if these are people who are not American citizens, they can be turned around and put on a plane back out of the country. So it's an aggressive step and a good way for him to catch these witnesses off guard, and I think you've seen him do it in a number of instances now.
And Barbara McQuade, with your experience as a federal prosecutor leading investigations, talk about some of the advantages that you have with people at airports, even leaving aside those extra rights that you have in dealing with them in the international zone of an airport, but just that the very fact that, well, you know exactly what door they're going to walk out of. It's a lot easier than, say, staking out an office building.
Yeah, you know, for a couple of things, it really reduces the risk to meet someone at the airport. Number one, you know when they're coming on, they're going to land and when they're going to arrive. So you don't have that element of surprise or that fear that they're going to panic and use a weapon and there could be something dangerous. The other thing is, to the extent that these are not American citizens, this could be the only opportunity to talk with them and even serve them with a subpoena or interview them. You know, we can't serve people all around the world, only those who are within our borders for, you know, court process. And so it eliminates that risk as well, that they might leave tomorrow, they might leave later today if we don't have this opportunity to talk with them. So I think in addition to sort of the strategic advantages that Matt talked about, you eliminate some risks of both physical danger and danger that you might just not catch up with them again.
And Congressman Swalwell, I know you were also a federal prosecutor, so we have a wealth of prosecutorial knowledge to draw on here. And I want to get your reaction to something that happened in the Manafort case today. This is a separate proceeding in which Manafort is, in effect, trying to sue to contain the scope of the Mueller investigation, claiming that the scope has gone too broad. And they reached a point today where the judge in the case actually said to Mueller's lawyers, I don't understand what is left of your case. And I have to say, Congressman Swalwell, I've been in a lot of federal courtrooms, a lot of other courtrooms. That's a rare comment from a judge.
Yeah, well, Lawrence, and I worked as a county prosecutor in Oakland, California, but the tactics were very similar to achieve our objectives. And, you know, I believe with Paul Manafort, you know, there is an overwhelming amount of evidence that he had prior relationships but in the business world and the political world with Ukrainians and people connected to Russia. He sought to hide those relationships from the U.S. government, and so you know, ideally he would cooperate and also assist us in knowing what Donald Trump's knowledge was. But also, Lawrence, the best thing that all of these witnesses can do at this point is to just come clean. Bob Mueller's team, they're demonstrating they're going to find out. They're going to get to the bottom of your BS story, whether it takes weeks or months to subpoena the outside records. They're going to put you down in that chair, and they're going to confront you. And if you lie to them, you're going to be charged with a false statement. If you cooperate, things could go much better for you. But if you did something, this team's going to find it. And that's a good thing, and it's a good message if Bob Mueller can do his job to send to the Russians that we're not going to tolerate this.
And Matt Miller, the Seychelles meeting comes into focus more and more. I remember when it first started to get mentioned, it was one of those things that wasn't easy to keep track in your head of where it fit. But clearly, Robert Mueller is zeroing in on it as the place where they were trying to, it seems, that the Trump administration was trying to establish a back channel to the Kremlin. And that back channel is what Robert Mueller wants to open up.
Yeah, you're right, Lawrence. When this story first broke about a year ago, I think last spring, and then other pieces of it broke earlier this year, it really was one of those stories where everything looked fishy, but it was hard to explain exactly what was going on. And the more we learn about it, the more disturbing it is. All of the players involved are all some of the sketchiest characters in this entire story. You have George Nader, who has been convicted of child pornography, who is there representing the United Arab Emirates. You have Erik Prince there representing the Trump administration, the notorious former CEO and founder of Blackwater. And one of the things a couple of the things that don't make sense about this meeting, why was the incoming Trump administration so eager to set up a back channel with the Russian government? They were going to be in the White House in just a few weeks. There are many ways for both the transition and the administration to talk to the Russian government without having a secret back channel. And the second thing is, why did everyone involved in this lie about it? We know that Erik Prince, when he went before Congressman Swalwell's committee, didn't tell the truth about this nature of the meeting, and it leads you to ask, if it was on the up and up, if there wasn't something they needed to conceal, why not just tell the truth?
Barbara, that's a great point, because the Seychelles meeting could just be something that they ended up getting tripped up into lying about and getting into legal jeopardy by lying about it. And the meeting itself might not have that much, you know, criminal potential in it. But more and more, it seems to be clearly the back channel that Robert Mueller is going for, and the team's belief possibly that within that back channel is what they need to find out about the Trump relationship to Russia.
Yeah, I think that's right. You know, the fact that people lie about things could be a crime in itself, but more often it's a red flag because it suggests a consciousness of guilt, that you've done something wrong and that's why you're trying to cover it up. And it's, you know, the second time we heard about this back channel, there was also the report that Jared Kushner had discussed seeking a back channel. And so if there's a back channel, what is it that they want to talk about that they couldn't talk about overtly? And so I'm sure that is something that is piqued the curiosity of Robert Mueller, and he wants to find out what was it they wanted to discuss that they didn't want the intelligence community to know about.
Barbara McQuade, Matt Miller, and Congressman Eric Swalwell, thank you all for joining this first round of discussion. Thank you. Appreciate it. We will be joined by the winner in another surprise election loss for Republicans in a state that President Trump won. And the Trump trade war is only going to make things worse in that state and other agricultural states for Republicans. And the president's national security advisor broke with the president today, but he has less than a week left on the job.
I never dreamed that I'd meet somebody like you. No, I don't wanna fall in love with you.
Whatever you do to stay healthy, you might be missing something. Your eyes. That's why there's Ocuvite. Ocuvite helps replenish nutrients your eyes can lose as you age. It has lutein, zeaxanthin, and omega-3. Ocuvite. Be good to your eyes.
Need a change of scenery? The Kayak Explorer tool shows you the places you can fly in your budget, so you can be confident you're getting the most bang for your buck. Aloha. Kayak. Search one and done.
Doing dishes, a boy knocks over a drink.
More doing chores for mom, Pearl?
His mother absorbs it with a Bounty paper towel. Now a trash bag leaks.
More doing chores for dad, Pearl.
His dad cleans this bill. The boy arrives home with a goldfish.
More earning something you love, Pearl. Bounty is more absorbent, so the roll can last 50% longer than the leading ordinary brand. So you get more life per roll. Bounty, the quicker picker-upper.
Whatever it is that makes your business great, promote it with Vistaprint. 500 standard business cards start at just $9.99 when you enter code TVPromo at Vistaprint.com.
Did you know that every time you use the internet, you put yourself at risk? Not only can your internet service provider see every website you visit, hackers can see your transaction details. Strangers can monitor your children's activity. NordVPN uses military-grade security protocols that protect your information so no one can see what you do online. Protect up to 6 devices for just $4 per month. Don't risk being hacked. Visit NordVPN.com/TV today.
Devoted viewers of the Weather Channel know that a Category 3 hurricane has winds up to 129 miles per hour. A Category 4 goes up to 156 miles per hour. And a Category 5 is anything and everything above 156 miles per hour. Now, those are all deadly destructive winds, depending on how you get hit by them, from Category 3 to Category 5. Category 5 for sure, Category 4 for sure. And that is how Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is now describing what the Republicans are facing in this year's congressional election. He told the newspaper in his home state of Kentucky, this is going to be a challenging election year. We know the wind is going to be in our face. We don't know whether it's going to be a Category 3, 4, or 5. So he just knows it's going to be deadly, and he doesn't know how deadly. The Republican leader of the House of Representatives is so afraid of how big the blue wave is going to be that Paul Ryan hasn't even announced that he will campaign for re-election for his own congressional seat in Wisconsin, which last night was the scene of the latest demonstration of the power of the big blue wave. The Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, is leading his Republican members into their re-election campaigns without even announcing whether he himself is going to run for re-election to his seat in Wisconsin. This is shockingly late on the election calendar for a Speaker of the House to leave his members guessing about whether he is confident of his own re-election in his home district. And Paul Ryan has more to be afraid of today than he did yesterday after last night's victory by liberal Rebecca Dallett in the election for an open seat on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. Rebecca Dallet will join us to tell us how she did it, and it was not a squeaker. She beat her conservative opponent by 12 points. Last night, Republican Governor of Wisconsin, Scott Walker, tweeted, "Tonight's results show we are at risk of a blue wave in Wisconsin." And then, of course, he had to throw in a little speech about the far left is driven by anger and hatred. We must counter it with optimism and organization. Let's share our positive story with voters and win in November. The trouble is Republicans did share their story with voters last night, and they lost last night in Wisconsin. It's the first time a Democrat won an open seat on the Wisconsin Supreme Court in 23 years. And what did Paul Ryan, the Republican Speaker of the House from Wisconsin, tell his troops today to bolster their confidence in November? Absolutely nothing. Not one word from Wisconsin's own Paul Ryan about this major upset for Republicans in Wisconsin last night. Joining our discussion now, John Nichols, National Affairs Correspondent for The Nation magazine, and Ruth Marcus, Deputy Editorial Page Editor and columnist for The Washington Post. And John, you're joining us from Wisconsin tonight?
I'm joining you from Madison, Wisconsin.
From Madison, Wisconsin. All right. So tell us what happened in Wisconsin. And this, by the way, is the second time the Republicans have seen an upset in an election in Wisconsin, and the second time that Scott Walker has warned Republicans about a blue wave.
Sure. What happened last night was something quite remarkable. As you noted, in this officially nonpartisan race for state Supreme Court, you saw the candidate who was backed by unions and progressives and essentially Democrats beat the candidate who was aggressively backed by Scott Walker, the NRA, and a lot of business interests. It was a pretty clearly defined race. And the interesting thing in Wisconsin is that over the last, quarter century, really, the Republicans, the conservatives, have figured out how to win these races. They've gotten very, very good at winning not just open seat races, but even occasionally beating an incumbent who's more progressive. And so for Scott Walker, this was supposed to be an easy one. Instead, last night was devastating. It wasn't just that Rebecca Dallet won by 12 points, as you've pointed out, but she won after a campaign in which she very clearly distinguished herself as a much more progressive thinker than her opponent, and also where she took on the NRA. She objected to her opponent's strong embrace of the NRA, and she won 36, we'll see how the final counting goes, but roughly she won half the counties in the state. That means she won urban counties, but she also won a lot of rural counties. She won about 24 counties that voted for Donald Trump.
Ruth Marcus, what do you make of the Speaker of the House, who is from Wisconsin, being silent about a big election outcome in Wisconsin?
If you don't have anything useful to say to your troops, why say anything at all? Look, it is always a risky moment for the party of the incumbent president in the off-year election. It's traditional to lose seats when the president has the approval ratings of this president. I know he tells us they're historically high and better than cheating Obama or whatever we called him the other day. But come on, not true. It is not going to be based on history and based on current reality. It is not likely to be a very good year for Paul Ryan's troops. So what does he have to gain by saying anything about a Wisconsin Supreme Court race?
John Nichols, is Paul Ryan being pressed by local media in Wisconsin on the question of, is he going to run for re-election to his seat?
Yes, increasingly when he's available. But one thing to understand about Paul Ryan is that he is increasingly, out of the circuit. He does still do events in his district. There's no question of that. But they tend to be much more closed. He doesn't do the traditional town hall meetings. Once upon a time, Paul Ryan was one of the most accessible political figures in Wisconsin, and media had an easy time getting to him. People in his district saw him a lot. That's not so true anymore. And it's part of what's given him political trouble in the state. But it also, I think, is a function of something that he's going through. I think he's really wrestling with the position he's in. I expect he'll run for re-election, but he has not said it yet, which is really quite remarkable.
Ruth, I want to put up a map created by your newspaper, the Washington Post, of soybean production in the United States. This is, of course, relevant because China, in fighting back against the Trump tariffs, is saying it's going to put a tariff on soybean production. And we see that goes right into, that is going to affect Wisconsin. It's going to go right into these states that actually swung the Electoral College for Donald Trump. And before we, let's switch it over to the map of corn production in the United States, which is also going to get hit with Chinese tariffs, and it covers a very similar area. And that is the sweet spot of how Donald Trump wins the Electoral College. But it's also a possible effect in the 2018 congressional elections once these tariffs actually have an effect, if they go into effect.
Sure, and glancing at the screen, it seemed like the only really sort of surprise and critical Trump state that isn't affected there is Pennsylvania. I don't think there's a lot of soybean production in Pennsylvania. And I think that's one reason why you're hearing some anxiety from people like the Senate Majority Leader talking about tariffs, talking about where this could lead, because the answer is not necessarily any place good for the economy and not necessarily any place good for Republicans in those districts that could be hit by the tariffs.
So category 3, 4, or 5, according to Mitch McConnell, depending on how high the tariffs get. Ruth Marcus, John Nichols, thank you both for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Up next, we will be joined by the winner of that Wisconsin election. She will join us next. Her win just increased Republican re-election fears. Also coming up, one of the president's senior advisors, national security advisor, has broken with the president, but he only has a few days left on the job.
As a control enthusiast, I'm all business when I travel. Even when I travel for leisure. So I go national, where I can choose any available upgrade in the aisle without starting any conversations or paying any F charges. What can I say? Control suits me. Go national. Go like a pro.
At Planters, we put fresh roasted flavor into every can, which has its drawbacks. Guys, know anything about this missing inventory? Wasn't me. The cheeks don't lie, chat. Irresistibly Planters.
Allergies with sinus congestion and pressure? You won't find relief here. Go to the pharmacy counter for powerful Claritin D. While the leading allergy spray relieves 6 symptoms, Claritin D relieves 8, including sinus congestion and pressure. Claritin D relieves more.
Just sign that first
I'm
one
so
there.
sorry. I don't feel comfortable signing that.
I don't get the math here.
Was this the same car we talked about?
What's this dealer preparation fee?
I'm so sorry. This just is not.
What we talked about.
Get the car without the car salesman. Carvana, the new way to buy a car.
At Farmers, we've seen almost everything, so we know how to cover almost anything, even close claws.
We took your shortcut, which
was a bad
idea. I can't believe that worked. No, I dropped the keys.
And we covered it. Talk to Farmers. We know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two.
We are farmers. Bum, 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 bum.
I'm all about my bed.
This mattress is dangerously comfortable.
When I get in, I literally say, ah.
Introducing the Leesa mattress, a better place to sleep.
This bed hugs my body.
I'm now a morning person. The Leesa mattress is designed to provide strong support, relieve pressure, and optimize airflow to keep you cool.
Hello, bed of my dreams.
Order online. We'll build it, box it, and ship it to your door for you to enjoy. Sleep on it for up to 100 nights and love it, or you'll get a full refund. Returns are free and easy.
I love my Leesa.
Today is gonna be great.
Read our reviews, then try the Leesa mattress in your own home. Experience the Leesa difference before you buy at any West Elm. Order now and get $125 off, plus a free pillow worth $75 and free shipping too. Go to buyleesa.com today.
You need this bed. WWE. 3 little letters, but one extraordinary experience.
Let's go. What a moment! Oh, absolutely incredible!
It's more than a spectacle. We are a community. We are WWE.
And here's the winner last night of that big upset victory in that statewide race for a seat on the Wisconsin Supreme Court.
I'm glad to say that we won this race, and I'm headed to the Supreme Court. Tonight we proved that when the people rise up and stand together, we can beat the special interests. We beat the NRA. We beat the millions of dollars that were spent on this race flooding into our state.
That was Rebecca Dallett in her victory speech last night, and Rebecca Dallett joins us now from Wisconsin, having been elected to a 10-year term on the Wisconsin State Supreme Court. Thank you very much for joining us tonight on your first national interview about this. And I just wanted to get into the role the NRA played in this campaign, and what were you saying about it, and what was your opponent saying about it?
Well, thank you, Lawrence, for having me. My opponent was endorsed by the NRA within 24 hours of the Parkland shooting, and I believe that that caused a lot of national attention to be drawn to this race. When we talk about the NRA right now, and as a parent of 3 daughters in high school and college, we talk about families like mine being afraid of having their kids in school. And my opponent vowed to protect the firearm freedoms of the NRA. They sent out mailers to that effect, and I think Wisconsinites were very concerned with that.
And as a political matter in Wisconsin, what were the risks for you in taking on the NRA?
Well, we have had a situation in Wisconsin for the last decade, the years that I've been a judge, where we've had special interest money pouring into these Supreme Court races, and money like groups like the NRA and other business lobbies and other groups. And that money has been buying justice or a justice. We've then had Supreme Court justices like the one I announced against, Justice Gableman, sitting on cases that involve parties that spent that money and refusing to step off of those cases, and then ruling in the favor of those groups that spent the money. Wisconsinites have seen that this isn't fair, and they've lost confidence in our courts. And I think this win was a win for Wisconsin and a win against special interests like the NRA trying to buy our courts.
You also had some outside help from Eric Holder and PACs that he was organized and supporting. How important was that in your win?
Well, I was grateful to have help of groups like the Eric Holder's group. The difference between me and my opponent, I made the statement and the promise to the voters that any group that spends money significantly on my race, I will not hear the cases involving those groups should they come in front of the court. And I think that's a big difference of what means we're going to have fair and independent courts in the eyes of the voters.
And this is a 10-year term, and so you're going to be wielding influence on that court for a long time to come. This is what makes it such an important race. And at what point did you feel, let me put it this way, did you know you were going to go over the top by 12 points?
Well, it's hard to know. I knew that going around the state, my message really resonated with voters, and I traveled our state far and wide since June 1st. And my message was one of experience. I've worked in our courts for more than 23 years, standing up for victims in some of the toughest cases of rape and child abuse, both as a prosecutor and a judge. And I spoke out against the special interests that have really bought our courts or appeared to buy our courts for the last decade. The message really resonated with voters, and I was certainly hopeful that they would turn out, which they did in great numbers last night.
What would you say to Democrats who are concerned about standing up to the NRA in some of their districts, some of their congressional districts around the country? Some of them want to, but feel that it might be too politically risky.
Well, I think that we all need to talk about fairness and independence especially in our courts. And when we have special interest money that is influencing and taking the place of the people, we all need to stand up to that. We've seen in this country, as we all know, this real interest on the part of our young people. And one of my daughters helped lead the walkout at her school. I participated in the March for Our Lives with one of my other daughters. We've seen a real interest taken in safety and gun violence prevention. It's a national conversation that I think everyone needs to be a part of.
Wisconsin State Supreme Court Justice-elect Rebecca Dalip, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Well, National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster got a knock-in on his boss, Donald Trump, on his way out the White House door.
Privacy in the digital age.
Privacy to us is a human right.
Facebook under fire.
If you were Mark Zuckerberg, what would you do right now?
I wouldn't be in this situation.
Okay.
Apple CEO Tim Cook lets loose in the interview everyone's talking about.
The DACA situation is not an immigration issue. It's a moral issue.
A special town hall hosted by Chris Hayes and Kara Swisher. Revolution. Apple changing the world. Friday at 8 on MSNBC.
Raindrops on roses and whiskers on kittens. Bright copper kettles and warm woolen mittens. Brown paper packages tied up with strings. These are a few of my favorite things.
Tomorrow. It's a day filled with promise and new beginnings, challenges and opportunities. At Ameriprise Financial, we can't predict what tomorrow will bring. But our comprehensive approach to financial planning can help make sure you're prepared for what's expected and even what's not. And that kind of financial confidence can help you sleep better at night. With the right financial advisor, life can be brilliant.
Going somewhere? Here's some advice. TripAdvisor now searches more than 200 booking sites to find the hotel you want and save you up to 30%. Trust this bird's words. TripAdvisor.
People know me as a volleyball player, but I'm a cross trainer as well. I run, I lift, I do yoga, and that means sore knees, that means sore back, that means sore everything. KT Tape helps me push past it.
Serious athletes use KT Tape to relieve pain in aching muscles and joints. Super easy to apply. Use it for many common injuries. Get it today at a store near you or buy online and get 20% off.
With KT Tape, I know that I can perform at my best.
KT Tape. Train longer. Finish stronger.
Sam, why is your head covered in bubble wrap?
Because I'm not covered in life insurance.
You should check out PolicyGenius.com. They compare all the best insurers to help you find the right policy. So it's super easy, unlike this. Compare and save with PolicyGenius.com.
To most people, I look like most people. But on the inside, I feel chronic, widespread pain. Fibromyalgia may be invisible to others, but my pain is real.
Fibromyalgia is thought to be caused by overactive nerves. Lyrica is believed to calm these nerves.
I'm glad my doctor prescribed Lyrica.
For some, Lyrica delivers effective relief for moderate to even severe fibromyalgia pain and improves function. Lyrica may cause serious allergic reactions, suicidal thoughts, or actions. Tell your doctor right away if you have these: new or worse depression, unusual changes in mood or behavior, swelling, trouble breathing, rash, hives, blisters, muscle pain with fever, tired feeling, or blurry vision. Common side effects: dizziness, sleepiness, weight gain, swelling of hands, legs, and feet. Don't drink alcohol while taking Lyrica. Don't drive or use machinery until you know how Lyrica affects you. Those who've had a drug or alcohol problem may be more likely to misuse Lyrica.
With less pain, I can do more with my family.
Talk to your doctor today. See if Lyrica can help.
Donald Trump could have been a radio sports announcer like Ronald Reagan was before the invention of television. In those days, you had to get the score right, but you could miss plays or make up stuff as a football radio announcer because no one could see what you were talking about. Television changed all that, but for Donald Trump, it doesn't matter what you can see.
Nobody's been tougher on Russia than I have. And you can, and I know you're nodding yes, because everyone agrees when they think about it.
No. No one in that room was nodding yes, and no one in that room agreed with him. He was speaking to a room full of reporters, and the president's national security advisor doesn't agree with him either.
Russia brazenly and implausibly denies its actions, and we have failed to impose sufficient costs. The Kremlin's confidence has grown as its agents conduct their sustained campaigns to undermine our confidence in ourselves and in one another.
That was yesterday, same day that Donald Trump said no one's been tougher on Russia than Donald Trump. That was H.R. McMaster's final speech as President Trump's national security advisor, and he said exactly what he knows Donald Trump did not want him to say. He is not a member of the Trump administration to publicly say he is. There's no member of the Trump administration who said he has not done enough to stop Russia. Here is what the president's director of the NSA, Michael Rogers, said in February.
I believe that President Putin has clearly come to the conclusion there's little price to play here.
Bingo.
And that therefore I can continue this activity. Clearly what we've done hasn't been enough.
The White House press secretary was hit with a tough question today. Does the president agree with his national security advisor that we failed to impose sufficient costs on Russia? Simple question, yes or no. A yes or no question with maybe an explanation after the yes or the no. But the Trump White House press secretary, as usual, decided that the way out of the corner that H.R. McMaster painted her into was to simply lie about what H.R. McMaster said and move on.
Does he agree with McMaster that we have failed to impose sufficient costs on Russia?
What McMaster actually said is that we've been very tough on Russia. He echoed the president's message that he said yesterday during the press conference with the Baltic leaders, that no one has been tougher on Russia than this president.
Joining our discussion, Richard Clarke, a senior White House advisor to 3 presidents on issues of cybersecurity and counterterrorism. He's the author of the book Warnings, Finding Cassandras to Stop Catastrophes. Richard Clarke, what do you make of H.R. McMaster saying very clearly the exact opposite of what the president was saying on the same day?
Well, Lawrence, this is a remarkable speech, and I actually urge viewers to go on the White House website and read it. It's that important. Apparently, you can only tell the truth in the Trump administration when you're running out the door. Tillerson did a little bit of that, and now McMaster is, in saying definitively that the Russians have done the nerve gas attack, the cyber attack in Ukraine, the penetration of our electric power grid, and saying pretty definitively, quote, we have failed to impose sufficient costs, and therefore they will do more. It's a remarkable speech. It's a speech that a president of the United States should have given about what the Russians have done and the entire pattern of Russian aggression. But there's been a strange silence from the president who should have given this speech. So McMaster gave it on the way out.
I want to listen to just a little bit more of what McMaster had to say.
Mr. Putin may believe that he is winning in this new form of warfare. He may believe that his aggressive actions in the parks of Salisbury, in cyberspace, in the air, and on the high seas can undermine our confidence, our institutions, and our values. Perhaps he believes that our free nations are weak and will not respond to his provocations. He is wrong.
But is he wrong? Is Putin wrong to think that the United States is weak in its response?
No, Putin's exactly correct in thinking that we're weak in our response. The president has not turned, ever, to his national security advisor, any of the ones he's had so far, and said, come up with a plan to push back on the Russians, to stop their aggression in Europe and stop their aggression in cyberspace. He's never ordered NSA to fight them in cyberspace. And I don't think he's ever going to. One of the remarkable lines in this speech by the president's national security advisor is, quote, even in the United States, public officials have developed idealized views of this tyrannical regime. Well, what public official do we think he's talking about, Lawrence?
Yeah. What should we be doing in our cyber defense against Russia?
Well, I think there are a number of things we can do, both offensive things and defensive things. I know there is a risk of doing offensive things, that they will retaliate and will get involved in a tit-for-tat escalation process. But at some point, you have to stand up to a bully, even if you risk a fight. And I think not having done that in the wake of repeated cyber attacks on our election, on our power grid, on our corporations, they're going to keep doing it. So I would find some target, perhaps the Internet Research Institute that attacked our elections, and I would attack them. I would wipe out their computer systems. And I would also find information online, perhaps about Putin's vast wealth, and reveal that publicly in our own version of WikiLeaks.
How much of that can the NSA do without a specific presidential order?
It cannot do it without a presidential order.
And there we are. Richard Clarke, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Many labor unions observed this anniversary of Martin Luther King Jr.'s death today because Martin Luther King Jr. was very active in the labor movement, and that was actually the last thing he did in his life, was participate in and support a labor strike in Memphis. That's next.
Do not mistake serenity for weakness. Do not misjudge quiet tranquility for the power of 335 turbocharged horses. The Lincoln MKX, more horsepower than the Lexus RX 350, and a quiet interior from which to admire them.
The Lincoln Spring Sales Event is here. For a limited time, get 0% APR on the Lincoln MKX. Hurry in today to your Lincoln dealer.
Today's workplace is rapidly changing, and HR professionals must be at the top of their game. Nothing spells that more clearly than SHRM CP and SHRM SCP, the profession's premier competency-based certifications from SHRM. Ongoing training to help you build a thriving workplace and keep your HR career on the move. SHRM CP, SHRM SCP. Credentials that say,
I am ready because I am. I am SHRM certified.
Learn more at shrm.org/SHRM certified.
It was here. I couldn't catch my breath.
It was the last song of the night. Felt like my heart was skipping beats.
I went to the ER. They said I had AFib.
AFib? What's AFib?
I knew that meant I was at a greater risk of stroke.
I needed answers.
Once I got the facts, my doctor and I chose Xarelto.
Xarelto, to help keep me protected from a stroke.
Once daily Xarelto, a latest generation blood thinner, significantly lowers the risk of stroke in people with AFib not caused by a heart valve problem. In a clinical study, over 96% of people taking Xarelto remain stroke-free.
Xarelto works differently.
Warfarin interferes with at least 6 of your body's natural blood clotting factors. Xarelto is selective, targeting just one critical factor. For AFib patients well managed on warfarin, there is limited information on how Xarelto compares in reducing the risk of stroke. Don't stop taking Xarelto without talking to your doctor, as this may increase your risk of stroke. While taking, you may bruise more easily or take longer for bleeding to stop. Xarelto can cause serious and, in rare cases, fatal bleeding. It may increase your risk of bleeding if you take certain medicines. Get help right away for unexpected bleeding or unusual bruising. Do not take Xarelto if you have an artificial heart valve or abnormal bleeding. Before starting, tell your doctor about all planned medical or dental procedures and any kidney or liver problems.
Learn all you can
to help protect yourself from a stroke.
Talk to your doctor about Xarelto.
From the time I was like 9 years old until I was probably 14, the majority of that time was spent in an orthodontist office, which is the most awkward point of anyone's life to begin with. I was right out of college and I was starting job interviews and meeting a bunch of new people, and I already noticed that my teeth were starting to shift. My parents spent all that money and it was kind of all for a waste. So when I heard of Smile Direct, I was so excited.
At Smile Direct Club, we believe everyone deserves a smile they'll love. That's why for 60% less than braces, we send invisible aligners directly to you. We straighten most smiles in an average of 6 months.
I was so excited to know that there was a company that was #1 affordable and #2 so convenient. You don't have to go to an orthodontist every month. You can go into a Smile shop. They also have a kit that they can ship directly to your house. There's really no excuse to not try it.
Get your confidence back risk-free. Our Smile Guarantee ensures that if aligners aren't a good fit for you, you get your money back.
Having straight teeth is such a great feeling.
Get started at SmileDirectClub.com for as low as $80 a month.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was in Memphis on this day 50 years ago because he was supporting a strike by sanitation workers in Memphis. The only place Memphis sanitation workers could escape from the rain on a garbage truck was inside the scoop of the garbage truck. That's where Robert Walker and Eckel Cole were hiding from the rain when the compressor suddenly malfunctioned and swallowed them into the belly of the truck 50 years ago. Their bodies were crushed along with the garbage inside the truck. The horror and degradation of their deaths was unbearable for their co-workers who all walked off the job and demanded the right to join a union. Their protest slogan was simple: I am a man. After speaking to a massive crowd on his first night in Memphis, Dr. King flew back and forth to Memphis for the next 2 weeks, squeezing in speeches and sermons in Harlem and Washington, and even managing to sleep at home in Atlanta 3 nights. The last time in his life that he spoke publicly was in Memphis at the Masonic Temple the night before he was assassinated. Every Martin Luther King Jr. speech had political content, and most had the emotion and rhythm and religious content of a sermon. The last speech had all of that. It was classic Dr. King, more than 40 minutes long, full of political argument and strategy, prayers and predictions, all delivered with no notes. Dr. King very explicitly called for nonviolence above all else in Memphis. He suggested that boycotts of some local banks and big companies like Coca-Cola might be necessary to get mayors to pay attention. He had death on his mind that night. He told the story of how he almost died years earlier when he was stabbed at a book signing in New York City. He revealed that the airline pilot on his flight from Atlanta that morning told him that the plane had been thoroughly searched for bombs and that the plane was guarded through the night because they knew Dr. King was reserved on that flight. And then he said this.
Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And he's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
The next day, on April 4th, 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was hit by one assassin's bullet at 6:01 p.m. At 7:05 p.m., he was pronounced dead at St. Joseph's Hospital. He was 39 years old. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. lived and died in his words, not fearing any man.
If you have moderate to severe plaque psoriasis, little things can be a big deal. That's why there's Otezla. Otezla is not an injection or a cream. It's a pill that treats psoriasis differently. With Otezla, 75% clear skin is achievable after just 4 months, with reduced redness, thickness, and scaliness of plaques. And the Otezla prescribing information has no requirement for routine lab monitoring. Don't use if you're allergic to Otezla. Otezla may cause severe diarrhea, nausea, or vomiting. Tell your doctor if these occur. Otezla is associated with an increased risk of depression. Tell your doctor if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts, or if these feelings develop. Some people taking Otezla reported weight loss. Your doctor should monitor your weight and may stop treatment. Other side effects include upper respiratory tract infection and headache. Tell your doctor about all the medicines you take and if you're pregnant or planning to be. Otezla, show more of you.
Restaurants you love, delivered with Grubhub.
If you just sign that first
I'm
one
so
there.
sorry. I don't feel comfortable signing that.
I don't get the math here.
Was this the same car we talked about?
What's this dealer preparation fee?
I'm so sorry. This just is not
what we talked about.
Get the car without the car salesman. Carvana, the new way to buy a car.
We knew Angie's List had reviews of home pros.
But so do lots of websites.
I didn't want to pay.
Then I found out it's free. Wait, it's free?
Free to check ratings, read reviews.
And they'll even match your project with a few qualified pros for the job. Go to angieslist.com today.
Meet the all-new SimpliSafe home security system, engineered with a single focus, to protect. Sensors so small, they're practically invisible. Designed to disappear into your home and blanket it with protection. All at prices that are fair and honest. This is SimpliSafe. Home security done right.
Do your thing. Fulfill. Realize. Love. Not like. Be extraordinary. Turn off the highway and soar. Spread your wings. Mazda. Feel alive.
They stand for those who stood for us and help those struggling or forgotten. They're dedicated to serving others. Join me each week as we pay tribute and honor those who serve.
On NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt. Apple CEO Tim Cook lets loose in the interview everyone's talking about.
If you were Mark Zuckerberg, what would you do right now?
I wouldn't be in this situation.
Okay.
A special town hall, Revolution, Friday at 8 on MSNBC.
On this 50th year commemoration of Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination, looking back at it, tonight's